Welcome to episode 5 of the Daniel's Nemesis podcast reading XBook Chapter 5. William continues his part of the story. ... Hearing that awful chapter title, you must be aware that you are back with me, Daniel's Nemesis, reading a very naive book that I wrote, which should be stored away in a locked cupboard picking up dust, only being discovered after my death and then just quietly burned. Instead, I have decided to share it with you and the rest of the internet. Yes, this is a series in which I read a chapter from said book each episode. The book is called XBook, and if you can imagine Independence Day meets Blackadder Goes Forth with a heavy mix of Salvador Dali, then you are in for a treat. If you can't, well, over a decade ago, I did, and this is the messy result. This is by no means a good book, but I was passionate about it. 10 years since I last looked at it, I decided I want to revisit it. I always love looking back at my naive awkwardness and seeing how little I've grown. And I want to share that with you as well. So, after each chapter, I shall discuss the chapter with a bit of self-examination. Maybe you can see now why I call myself Daniel's Nemesis. It's not to hide my identity as I bare my soul, it's because I am my own nemesis. Clever name, right? This is episode 5, and so chapter 5. What has happened so far? Well, Ginger is going away on Christmas vacation and sometimes acts like a 5-year-old with a weird attachment to machinery. And William, today's hero, sometimes likes to treat a monitor as a mirror and has made at least one decision in his life. Please remember, this is fiction, always fiction. Logic is as logic does. William continues his part of the story. I know that you want to know what happened to us. I shall tell you. 850 Earth years ago, a mass evacuation was carried out from the nearest planet bearing civilized life. Trasconia. Our planet. Our solar system was dying. The sun was growing until it would become too hot for life on Trasconia. If the inhabitants did not leave soon, they would die. In a few million years, all the water on the planet will have evaporated, leaving a huge mass of cloud blocking out all light, trapping all heat, and the pressure will start to grow, crushing anything not specially built for these conditions. Eventually, these too will be destroyed. Things began looking bleak. The future would be bright. The future would be orange. The future would be just one gigantic orange sun. Many probes have been sent out in the thousands of years before the evacuation, looking for a suitable planet to call home, and, fortunately, a planet was found with conditions that, almost identically, matched those found on Trasconia. Unfortunately, this planet already contained life. Life which called themselves humans. If we Trasconians were to land at any of the other planets with suitable conditions, it would take us in excess of 10,000 years. Fuel and food supplies would never be able to last that long, but the journey to Earth seemed much more within the realms of possibility. It was decided to take this risk and to sort out the necessary details about the humans when we arrived. With luck, a compromise would be made and our two races could share the planet in harmony, exchanging technologies. Not that we believed at the time the humans had much to exchange with their primitive technology, and giving aid to each other. But in the eventuality of these humans not being prepared to make such a compromise, a number of smaller fighter craft were to be included, but to be used only in the most desperate of situations. Our ancestors, when planning their preparations to find our new home, had peaceful intentions. But there was much more. Before all that, before anyone knew what was happening, people needed to know what was going on. The first major difficulty was in how to get there. Space travel was the immediate obvious answer, but there was also an obvious difficulty. With such a large distance to cover and such a large amount of people and, on top of that, the supplies that would be needed, not to mention the engines that would be needed to push this mass, increased in size by the powers that would be needed to get such a large mass going at such a fast pace. How would it be possible to move an entire world? Ideas were thrown all round the place, but no one had the answers that were needed, such as where the destination was, the length of the journey, the size of the actual destination, and just how suitable the destination would be. As well as the supplies needed for the journey, what tools would be needed if the planet turned out to be not that suitable and lacking in, say, simple building materials. The first probe sent out had still not returned any answers, and probes were sent out in the following centuries. Many of them. Panic began setting in on the world of Trasconia. Some, feeling more doomed than others, began breaking out into riots. The government tried many tricks, keeping the information locked away so that with lack of knowledge, people would not get scared, but this could not last forever. As time went on, there were noticeable changes in temperature over the centuries, and land masses started disappearing under the seas. This was caused in part by gases placed by us in the atmosphere, which was seriously not helping causes. Some people knew the answers, of course, and the information could never be kept secret for long. Reassurances were sent out that the world would not be doomed for thousands of years yet. But somehow, even that reassurance of thousands of years was much too short for a planet that was meant to survive forever. Eventually, answers came. The probes were small and could travel very fast, yet still only a fraction of light speed. One that had been sent out 1,000 years before returned with news of a planet that would, ultimately, be 10,000 years away. Plans were discussed, but the answer seemed too big. 5 years later, news of another planet hit home. The planet looked more inhabitable, but was even more hundreds of years further away. However, third time lucky, a probe that had been sent out only 2 decades earlier had hit home. There was a planet that they could easily inhabit. It was only approximately 5 light years away. It would take less than 1,000 years of travel time. Still a large amount of time, but was within a much more anticipated time frame. Plans and talks suddenly increased tenfold in their intensity. How to get there was the question asked again. They could build a ship to tow the planet, but that would be silly, because as soon as it was taken away from its home in the solar system, the planet would freeze over, destroying life on the planet and any of the conditions on it. It would just be an uninhabitable rock, even if the people could survive. It was silly and absurd, but talked about for a couple of years. What about the large numbers of the peoples that created the population of the world? A lottery was to be drawn up closer to the time, with a set number of people allowed. But with this in mind, people felt less inclined to give birth, as they felt their children's lives would become unnecessary if they were to be left on the planet with no hope. It was also feared that more rebellions and riots would happen if people were forced away from their loved ones, or suicides would occur. Although suicide was a good solution, as it would cut down on the population, making the numbers that bit easier to deal with. The lottery idea, regrettably, was scrapped at a later date. Instead, what would be needed? One massive ship or a smaller fleet of ships? Years of research went into shipbuilding and the mathematics and physics involved. It was decided that a fleet of smaller vessels would be the best course of action. Although more expensive, the ships could be built quicker, with each country responsible for producing their own. With this determination to build ships underway, a new calm was able to come over the world of Trasconia. With a renewed sense of purpose and escape on the horizon, the sense of doom lifted. But the calm was very short before the storm. It would take decades, if not centuries, to build the ships. Those who started would never get to see the craft even half built. The taxes had risen extremely high in order to be able to build these ships, and with most of the tax going on the ships, the world they were leaving was left to decay as it began to feel useless and old. The decay creeping in was all right for those who were to leave the planet, But for those who would grow old and die beforehand, the decay was not acceptable. More riots and revolts took place. Information from other probes came back. There was still none as good as the Blue Planet. It was decided that instead of letting each country have complete control over their own ship, it was decided to have a mothership that would lead the way. The destination would be entered in and could not be altered. These ships would have to obey the mothership and the messages it sent to the other ships as it guided the way. Although the destination was to be pre-programmed, the course was to be flexible, as asteroids, comets, and meteor belt would definitely need to be circumnavigated by each ship. But after these obstacles were overcome, told so by the mothership, the destination would become the main focus for each ship again. These minor course deviations were acceptable. It was feared that rebellions may occur and that the fleet would separate and go in different directions in search of new worlds. The ships were nearing completion. They had to decide who was to become the mothership. Some countries immediately assumed it was to be them. Others were prepared to take the responsibility, but did not expect to get it. War was declared. But there was no money for defense or attack. Talks ensued with this lack of armies and weapons. They did not go smoothly, they did not go that quickly, but were accomplished with less expense and time wasting than war had ever achieved. They were all silently surprised. Due to high standards of education, scientific output, and athletic output, a nation was chosen after a vote had been put forward. Though democratically decided, the decision was resented as the leaders knew that at some point in time their own nation had been considered the strongest in these fields. But that had to be put aside. Time was to tell. An evacuation date was called. The people left their houses, homes, and past lives. Some early, some late. Houses were searched to make sure people had left, but this was haphazard and lazy. Many chose to be left behind, and the governments did not care, as the numbers on board ships were already very large. It had taken nearly 500 years to complete the ships, and the designs altered as new fashions and technological improvements were added. The ships left the atmosphere. In most, huge viewing ports had been created at the back of ships, where a great many temples were soon to be found. And on the day of departure, they were overcrowded, most not getting the chance to say goodbye to the planet they would never see again, as it turned into a ball, into a star, into nothing. 850 years later, we have arrived. I am the ruler of the Trascon race. My name is Skadge Fright. Yes, we have peaceful intentions. I, for one, certainly hope that our two races will one day live harmoniously, side by side. Yet, I regret that the humans, when faced by us, will not know what to make of us. I fear that they will consider us a threat to their lives, to their society, to their culture. Had this been 2,000 years ago, when we first came across the planet, we would have been able to assimilate ourselves smoothly into Earth. Who knows? Maybe they would have thought us gods. Maybe they would have thought us new beings that humans had not yet encountered on Earth. Who knows? My concern is this. Humans are not like that anymore. They are too aware of themselves and the Earth that they live upon. We will never be anything but aliens. The humans are now in a position where they can start to stand up to such a threat as ourselves. The way that they have been progressing, I doubt it will be long before they can match us in strength. Therefore, we can only consider them a threat. This is a two-way process. Yet, our ancestors, our entire race, have all invested far too much to give up now. We are here. Deal with it. Take Skernage, for instance. A trusted friend, I guess. Skernaj has been born on this ship. All his life he has only ever known life in a confined space, never once being out into the open air. Instead, breathing air that has been recycled so many times one can almost see it. However, Skernaj has been lucky. He has come under the leadership of myself, as an acquaintance, if not friend, as a subject. As with all my subjects, I do not intend to see our voyage fail. Not now. I intend to finish paying the debt to my people and my ancestors that I started paying as soon as I became supreme leader. I intend safely to get to Earth and create a new home for ourselves. I have but one final installment to make. Unfortunately, I feel that this is becoming the hardest to pay. Sometimes, in my quietest moments, I wonder if I ever can. Before I can dwell on this any longer, however, Skernaj turns to me and speaks. "Trazag Hanklon, retting von," he says. Literally translated, it means that the reconnaissance mission is underway. It is not this that riles me, however. In order to make ourselves more acceptable to those on Earth, in order to get past the monstrous faces that they will no doubt see in us as we see in them, I have made my people talk in English. We are fluent in many more languages, yet as English appears to be the dominant language, so I have made it on board our ships. I do not deny that people speak in their native tongues at home. I do not grudge that. But as practice in diplomatic and official situations, I enforce it in schools, in work, most especially on the bridge where we are situated now. I regard Skernaj's words as nothing more than a mere slip. It happens. But what if we are on Earth and our language slips out? Could the paranoid humans not believe that we are discussing something so petty as war, insulting them? I do not know what they might construe. It is not a gamble I desire to take. For this reason, I glare at Skernaj. Skernaj looks slightly panicked. He always does. He knows he has made a mistake, but this does not stop him from looking worried. This also bothers me. In such a major situation dealing with humans, can this not be seen as a sign of weakness? Skernaj is a good person, I know that. But there are too many risks, and even this look of worry cannot be tolerated. But pity takes me as I talk to him. "Speak English, my dear boy! We will be on Earth soon. They will not be able to understand us if we talk like that. So get some practice in." "Yes, Supreme Leader, I do apologize." This comes out a bit broken, but he has been practicing. I do not think that people understand this desire of mine that everybody should speak in a human tongue. They think that we should be getting the humans to talk our language. Yes and no. To successfully gain entry into Earth, I regret that we are going to have to play by their rules to a small degree. It does not make us look very dominant, but I have to be strong enough to give way in certain areas, I guess. Apology accepted. Continue. "The reconnaissance mission is underway." "Very good. Can you put the pictures up on the screen?" There is a love-hate relationship with the Earth, and an interesting parallel can be drawn up with an ancient religion. Many, many thousands of years ago, there was a more extreme society of our people. These were still in the Dark Ages, when Trasconia was still healthy and gave much sustenance. These people believed that to gain entry to their heaven, you would need to fight the armies guarding the gates, that by winning this battle, you would rightfully gain entry to this heaven. Many of my people see Earth as a promised land, but they see the humans as being some kind of guards to battle first, before we can rightfully gain entry. There is some logic to this idea after all. When we enter the Earth, our old life in space will be over, and a new way of life will begin. But I see more. I feel that there is some kind of a code to crack concerning Earth. That there is an easy way in, but I cannot see it. Earth's history is too bloody. Yet even now, I feel a strong need to study Earth. I have to understand. This is why I now need to view Earth. I have even added my own personal touch. I have taken an Earth name, William. This will be recognizable to humans, and hopefully they will consider me to be more friendly. I wear human clothes. A cloak. The nature of its design is different to our clothes. We wear largely light clothes, loose clothes. After all, our sun was heating up our planet. Sometimes life forms cannot evolve that quickly. But I have chosen a cloak, because although of human design, I can still exist as a Trascon without the clothes taking too much of my identity. Skernaj bows his head towards the console. A moment later, the image on one of our many screens has changed. No longer is this screen displaying positions of the fleet, ship statistics, and layouts. Simple navigational maps. It displays Earth. Skernaj controls the focus until the image is crystal clear. It shows pictures of the countryside of England. Skernaj pans the camera around at my command and focuses on an automobile. When we first came across Earth 2 millennia ago, almost, a myth has it that the humans had made virtually no technological advances of any major scientific degree. Yet, the evidence we have is to the contrary. Still not a major threat to us, but they have certainly harnessed the power of mechanics and electricity, unlike the animal power of said myth, says Skernaj. And this is why we must be careful, I say back to him. Inside this automobile, we can see a human waving. Other members of the crew start jeering. They always hate seeing humans, believing that their fate is not promising. Yes, sire, but you must remember, sire, that the humans are creating new technologies and new weapons all the time. Pretty soon, they may be able to equal us in firepower. Plus, the humans have just experienced a war. We may be able to weaken them more if we were to keep up the tensions between the different leaders. It is important that we find out everything that we can so that we make absolutely no mistakes. Oh, greatest being that this multiverse has ever known about. This is why I like Skernaj. He actually shows a knowledge, a level of understanding, but even he must think deeper. Put out a press report. The invasion starts tomorrow. Yes, your Lord High Excellency of Supremeness. I look in the direction of the door. For a few minutes, I just blankly look at it. Better, right? I like this chapter for the most part. We get to see more of William this time. I say see more. He does spend at least half of this chapter giving us a story of how and why the Trascons got to Earth. But still, better than looking in a mirror. This jumps around in time with its own history initially. Not telling things chronologically, so sorry for any confusion there. There's a lot that I could say. Many different details in that exposition. Riots, confusion, the fact that this is a concern that takes place over many centuries, and the impact on a sentient species as a whole. Maybe you didn't notice this, but it's all a metaphor. A metaphor for what we are doing to our environment. Clever, eh? I'm a bit of an eco-warrior here. William doesn't go into detail about how much the Trascons themselves poison their own atmosphere. However, Their solar system has certainly aged to the point where the sun has grown more than ours. You could look at the conditions on Trasconia due to the expanding sun as based on what will happen to us one day as the Earth turns into the new Venus. The Goldilocks zone that Trasconia inhabited got a bit too hot for Goldilocks' liking, and its inhabitants needed to find a new baby bear, aka Earth. And let's face it, as we talk about colonising the moon, Mars, beyond, we have started to think in the same way. For once, I am at least able to root my flights of fancy in some kind of fact in this story. The Trascons are the same as us. It's just that they got the technology first, but also the expanding and threatening sun. Are the Trascons, as we have seen them so far, what we would be like when we eventually have to abandon Earth for good? I also looked at the idea of civilizations and empires and the shifting balance of power over time. The Romans, the Greeks, Mesopotamia, the British Empire, and today, America and China. The Trascons obviously had similar power shifts throughout their history. The Trascons had to choose one power to lead them through 850 years of travel. If we had to agree today what country should lead us in 1,000 years' time, heck, even in 10 years' time, which country would you choose? Who's to say that Wales won't suddenly become the dominant power in 500 years' time? I believe in you, Wales. As a leader, William is supposed to be aware of all of this history and the impact of this on his own people. I mean, imagine having to wait 1,000 years for news on your new home. But despite this being his internal monologue, here he is actually lecturing, and it does make you wonder who he is talking to, if it's not you, the reader, or currently listener, yourself. However, I love this chapter. I found it as fascinating to explore an entire world as I did the insides of Ginger's head. Heavy exposition, I know, but I really wanted to rewrite this whole book just through William's eyes in order to explore the Trascon race and history more. A lot of invasion stories don't give the aliens a voice. I really wanted to. I'm not saying I'm the only person to have done so, yet through chapters like this, I felt I really got to know William and was happy for him to say much more. The Shining Light. The whole backstory. Bit of pride there for me after 4 episodes of pure embarrassment. No, that's not fair. There needs to be a specific detail, which is probably the government's not actually doing anything about the suicides, but working behind the scenes to encourage it. As William says, the lottery idea was regrettably scrapped at a later date. An evil detail, and shows them to be more concerned with human life than their own race. And it is a solution to overcrowding, which, let's face it, is a problem we are going through today. Not that I condone mass suicide in any way. This is a major issue that I was very flippant with. They don't even bother to really check that every citizen is on board upon departure. I didn't know much about overcrowding back when I wrote this. I knew populations grow, and that's a problem when you have a confined space. But with the rapid expansion of the human race over the last 2 centuries, I can't imagine now what a similar expansion rate would be over 850 years, particularly when confined in spaceships. I just think of buses in countries like India, so full that people are sat on the roof. I don't think that works for spaceships. Also, with suicide being a viable option, clearly Christianity had not spread to Trasconia. Quote of the day. More a passage than a quote. Plans and talks suddenly increased tenfold in their intensity. How to get there was the question asked again. They could build a ship to tow the planet, but that would be silly because as soon as it was taken away from its home in the solar system, the planet would freeze over, destroying life on the planet and any of the conditions on it. It would just be an uninhabitable rock, even if the people could survive. It was silly and absurd, but talked about for a couple of years. Just the imagery. Imagine that this could be done. Imagine a planet towed across the universe and with the possibility of keeping conditions good on the surface. What are you going to do? Shove a massive anchor through the centre of the planet and jerk it away? The whole planet would stop rotating. It'd be really sunny on one side for a long time and dark on the other until they got away from the sun, where everything would be dark. I don't often think about the effect of the Earth's rotation on us, just Everything suddenly stopping like that, it's like pulling a tablecloth with lots of wine glasses resting on it. I know what would happen if I gave it a go. It would be messy. And I imagine the same result for anchoring a whole planet. And then, when they get to Earth, what are they going to do? Replace Earth with their own planet? Or just have two planets moving around on the same axis around the Sun, if that's even possible? Go back to where you come from, Traskons! Coming over here and taking all of our orbit? If they have that technology, then, rather than cross the universe, couldn't they just gently nudge the planet's orbit away from their own sun until they were back at a comfortable distance from it? Clearly, this was not a viable option, and spaceships were. I just like the idea that towing a planet was talked about for a couple of years. Knowing our political situation on Earth, I imagine that conversation to be never-ending. Cheesiest Moment. This has been a very self-congratulatory chapter to date, so let's rectify that. The cheesiest moment for me is Skirnadge's terrible exposition line at the end of the chapter, reminding William that humans had evolved over the last 2,000 years, and may be a bit of a threat. I mean, William had already stated that. That's why they bought fighter craft, just in case. It serves no purpose and is patronising, without there being any need to patronise. It patronises William, it patronises you. But, well, the story was set 100 years ago. I guess early 20th century weaponry does look primitive and unable to stand up to aliens. I guess that I left it in there to imply that there would be some kind of challenge from the humans and that the Traskons were wary, while still acting as the superior aggressors. It's just awkward and clumsy. I guess I just had Skirnadge in the room and felt the need for him to contribute in some way and justify his presence. The cutting room floor. What would I change? Last episode I spoke of satellite chapters, and here we have another satellite chapter, and not just because the Traskons are satelliting the Earth. This doesn't move the story forward, but by heck we learn a lot. And there is self-contained drama in the story that William tells, and the tensions and stakes. This is a major-scale disaster movie in a few short pages. Beat that, Roland Emmerich. But what's the main issue that I would change? Well, the second part of this chapter where William interacts with the world around him could be stronger. I mean, it's essentially him catching up with where the story is and his place in the Traskon story to date. And he uses Skirnadge as an example of where the Traskons are currently, and his choice of clothing as an example of how he will interact with the humans. So, we have moved from the past to the present, and the present acts as an example of how they will move forward into the future now that they have arrived. But still, that interaction, it's weak, isn't it? And again, drama-wise, nothing happens. He's too focused on his own story. If he has to interact with the present world around him, then there needs to be a reason. Last episode I went into depth there. Same feelings apply this episode. But, interaction aside, I really like this chapter and how I dealt with the exposition, and how I am setting up William's position in the story. A bit of talking heads is fine, and I feel I justify the talking heads. And I did some showing as well. Just, the interaction with Skirnadge fell flat, and an excuse for some more pointless exposition on Skirnadge's side. I'd sort that out. Otherwise, fine. Happy. I think this may have been one of the chapters that I worked on the most throughout the whole book, and I believe that the effort was worth it. This is the beginning of the XBook that I love. This is the beginning of the book that I wanted to share with you online. The book that I actually wanted published. Oh, and maths and numbers could be fiddled with to be more realistic. The largeness of the numbers is great, and I'm sure plenty of mathematicians have problems with the figures that I give. The Psychologist's chair. Well, we've seen two sides of Ginger over 2 chapters. Now we've seen 2 sides of William. Here, he is acting the part of a leader, possibly a dictator, if you look at how he gets people to address him. The grandest supreme leader of all time, North Korea style stuff. Maybe this is tradition as opposed to his ego, but if so, a tradition that he keeps in check. He gets his whole race to speak English, in effect changing the official language. Now, his reasons may be good to communicate with humanity, but still, this is a whole world of people he's making speak English, not just a few. That is him wielding some power there. He even states in reference to speaking English, "To successfully gain entry into Earth, I regret we are going to have to play by their rules to a small degree. It does not make us look very dominant, but I have to be strong enough to give way in certain areas, I guess." If that isn't clear, what is? Also, the cloak. That may have no symbolic meaning to the Traskons, and just the fact of wearing human clothes is a quirk. But look at how he wants to interact with the humans. He wants to be understood. And he knows that when they see the cloak, they will interpret that as a symbol of power, though he states that it's to be seen as friendly. He is attempting to communicate with the humans, not just with language, but symbolism as well. The way he projects who he is masks his intentions. He wants others to see him as a rational being, yet really he is serving his own purposes, at least in this chapter. So far we have arrogant Ginger and childlike Ginger. Insecure William, strong, controlled, domineering William. And, we have the prologue. There's a character there. A character who in that chapter is portrayed as godlike or celestially magical, in the sense that she can transport us around the universe, make us marvel at the vastness and majesty of space, and examine the smallest building blocks. God complex, arrogance, insecurity, childlikeness, domineering egomaniac. One character regresses, one character has, progressed. Though that suggests improvement, and I hardly consider domineering to be an improvement. Arrogance, God complex, domineering. As traits, these are not a million miles away from each other, and in the last episode I mentioned how podcasting was just an opportunity for me, the now me, to be self-indulgent. Am I a bit of a twat? Or, both characters have shown two sides of their personalities, and this is a story where the two main characters are on different sides. The antagonist is the protagonist and vice versa. Am I revealing an undiscovered multiple personality disorder? Well, I think this is more a reflection of how I changed over 8 years of redrafting this book. William, for example, was more arrogant, a Machiavellian villain in his earliest incarnation who became humbled by pressure in his latest incarnation, a moment we saw in his debut chapter. This, I think, is a reflection of me getting good grades at GCSE in school and then really struggling through A-levels. Ginger was a more naive character in his first incarnation that became angry as the world failed to notice him or his car through his eyes, back to the BDSM cyborg thing, in this version of the book. A reference to me going from school to university and beyond, into the wider world, which baffled and confused me. And not being noticed. Not achieving the dreams and goals I had. Well, dreams. Goals suggest some kind of plan that I severely lacked. But I shall stop it there. It's unfair to compare 8 years of my life writing this silly piece of fiction to a handful of chapters. I may pick up this idea again later on, but let's see how these characters evolve as the story progresses. Farewell! So what have we learned today? That maybe William is a bit more manipulative and in control than when we first saw him in his unconfident self, and perhaps he has bipolar or split personality syndromes. And we learned a brief history of a worldwide evacuation. And remember that all these comments are my own personal opinions. Just because I'm the one who wrote the story doesn't mean that my opinions are correct. And what shall we be looking for next time? Well, William goes into more deep exploration in his lecture to his audience. TTFN, see you next time. Bye bye. And just in case you're wondering, All text was written by me, Daniel's Nemesis, and XBook is purely a work of fiction and is not meant to be based on anyone or any events at all. The music was also by me, Daniel's Nemesis, as was the image for the accompanies this podcast. It sucks, doesn't it? But there we go.